Hello, my name is Anthony Ford, and today I will be discussing how does ground reaction force change during endurance running. So the most important terms that I want to help you understand is that whenever you want to cause a movement, you are creating a force, and whenever you are making contact with the ground, there's a phenomenon called a ground reaction force that's being produced in response to you contacting the ground. And while this occurs in multiple dimensions, the primary dimensions that I want to be talking about is vertically, so up and down, and anterior and posterior, which is refers to forward and back. And then every time someone is running, there is a stance phase and a flight phase that is occurring. So a stance phase is just every single time that your foot is contacting the ground, and then the flight phase is every single time that both feet are off of the ground. And every single time there is a stance phase, there is an amount of time that you're contacting the ground, which is simply contact time. So this is an excellent illustration about ground reaction force. So the red arrow is simply telling us that that vertical ground reaction force is traveling up the body, and the solid line on the graph it shows us that there are two peaks of ground reaction force that is occurring vertically: the initial impact, and then the person pushing against the ground and creating more active force until they eventually leave the ground. And then as for what's happening forward and back, that's when there is a braking force. So the initial resistance that someone is having when they when they feel the ground push against them until they are pulling themselves forward and pushing forwards, and then that's when they're experiencing a propulsive force that is occurring in the opposite direction, indicated by the green and blue respective arrows. And what I found out is that you can actually kind of adjust the amount of ground reaction force that is occurring. So basically, the faster of a pace that someone runs in generally will increase the amount of ground reaction force that is occurring. And then if they're running on a stiffer surface, that will decrease contact time that you're on the ground and increase total ground reaction force. And then if you're running on a softer surface, that'll that'll increase contact time, and then it'll decrease ground reaction force. And this is pretty consistent regardless of how exhausted you are. So what this set of data basically tells us is that from the very beginning of a run all the way to 100% of exhaustion, the most important factors, so the first peak of ground reaction force with the red arrow, the second peak with the purple arrow, and then with the propulsive force and the braking force with blue and green, throughout the entire time from the very beginning to exhaustion, all of those values are fairly constant. So that means that throughout an entire event, you can adjust how much ground reaction force that you're experiencing, and that it'll remain fairly constant regardless of how exhausted you are. So if you want to maintain a constant ground reaction force, you can run on the same surface, run at the same pace, ground reaction force will be fairly constant. If you want to adjust how much force you're kind of feeling against the ground, like maybe you're running on, like, heaven forbid, sidewalk, then you can kind of slow down your pace and kind of just ease up on yourself, so that way it's not as harsh on your body. Or if you know you're on a comfortable surface like grass, then you can run a little bit harder, and you'll be able to get away with it since it won't feel as harsh, since there's less ground reaction force being produced. And I think having that adaptability regardless of what event you're doing is fantastic.